Amelie had always been the kind of person who believed in family first. Working in Johannesburg, she had built a small but cozy apartment for herself, a place she was proud to call home. When the opportunity came for her to travel abroad for 6 months on a work project, she didn't think twice about who should look after her place. Her cousin Thandi came to mind immediately. Thandi was younger, still finding her feet in the city, and Amelie thought this would be a perfect way to help her out. So she handed over the keys with a smile, not asking for rent, not even expecting a thank you beyond the first hug. She made sure the fridge was stocked, cupboards filled, and even left little notes about how to work the tricky geyser and where to find spare light bulbs. She wanted Thandi to feel at home, to feel safe. It wasn't just about lending her a roof, it was about opening her heart. Amelie trusted Thandi completely. They grew up together, shared secrets as kids, and leaned on each other through tough times. To Amelie, this was what family was all about, lifting each other when life gave you the chance. She imagined Thandi studying, working, or just saving money while staying there, and it filled her with pride to be in a position to give. As Amelie packed her bags for the trip, she felt nothing but peace, certain that her home and her cousin were in good hands. After 6 long months away, Amelie couldn't wait to be back in her own space. The work trip had been rewarding but exhausting, and all she wanted now was to curl up on her familiar couch, breathe in the comfort of her little apartment, and finally rest. On the plane ride home, she pictured the walls with her favorite framed photos, the little plant by the window that always leaned toward the sun, and the soft blanket she used to wrap around herself after long days. The thought of it made her smile the whole way back. But the moment she reached her door, something felt off. The locks looked newer, shinier, almost like they'd been replaced. She brushed it off, thinking maybe the landlord had fixed them while she was away. She knocked, expecting Thandi to greet her with excitement, maybe even a big hug. Instead, when the door opened, Thandi stood there stiff, her face cold, her eyes hard. "Oh, you're back," she said flatly, like Amelie was an unexpected guest, not the actual owner. Amelie laughed awkwardly, thinking it was some kind of strange joke, but as she stepped inside, her heart sank. The apartment didn't look like her home anymore. The bright cushions she had carefully picked were gone, replaced with dull colors she would never choose. The family photos she once kept on the wall had vanished. Even the small painting her friend had gifted her was nowhere to be seen. It felt strange, like walking into a stranger's place that just happened to be shaped like hers. She dragged her suitcase in slowly, glancing around in disbelief. "Where's my stuff?" she asked, her voice trembling. Thandi shrugged, not meeting her eyes. "I put some things away. This setup works better for me." Her tone was sharp, almost defensive. Amelie's stomach tightened. She hadn't expected a red carpet welcome, but this coldness cut deep. Trying to stay calm, Amelie headed toward her bedroom, desperate to find at least one piece of familiarity. But the door didn't open. It was locked. Her own bedroom, with her own bed and her clothes, was shut off to her. She turned back, confusion written all over her face. "Why is this locked?" she demanded. Thandi crossed her arms. "I needed privacy. That's my room now." The words hit Amelie like ice water. She blinked, trying to process what she had just heard. Everything in her chest tightened, and for the first time, she realized something was very wrong. This wasn't just a few changes in decoration. This wasn't just a cousin making herself at home. It felt like she had been pushed out of her own life, as if her absence had erased her claim to the very space she had so freely given. Standing in the middle of what used to be her safe haven, Amelie suddenly felt like a stranger, unwanted and uninvited, in the home she had worked so hard for. And Thandi, the cousin she trusted most, looked back at her like she didn't belong there anymore. Amelie stood frozen, staring at Thandi as if she hadn't heard her properly. The words hung in the air, heavy and cruel. "This is my place now. You left it, so it's mine." At first, Amelie thought maybe her cousin was joking, a bad attempt at humor after months apart. But Thandi's expression was stone cold. There was no smile, no laughter waiting to break through. She meant every word. Amelie's throat went dry. "What are you talking about? This is my apartment. My name is on the lease. I left you here to help you, not to give it away." Her voice shook, not just with anger but with hurt. She had trusted Thandi with everything, and now she felt like the ground beneath her was slipping away. Thandi didn't budge. She leaned against the counter, arms crossed, eyes sharp. "You left. You moved on with your life overseas. Everyone knows you're not coming back. So why should you suddenly think you can walk in here and take over? This is my home now." The words hit Amelie like knives. She couldn't understand how her own cousin could twist the story so easily. The neighbors who used to greet her warmly in the hallway now gave her puzzled looks. When she tried explaining, some shook their heads gently, saying, "But Thandi told us you moved abroad for good. She said you gave her the place." Others avoided eye contact, as if they didn't want to get involved. Amelie felt the walls closing in on her. Her once friendly community suddenly looked unfamiliar, even hostile. The little old lady downstairs, who always complimented her dresses, had already given her an icy glare that morning. A neighbor she'd shared tea with whispered behind her back. Thandi had painted her as someone who abandoned everything, and people believed it. Inside, Amelie's chest ached with betrayal. This wasn't just about furniture or locked doors anymore. It was about her cousin rewriting reality, stealing not only her apartment, but also her reputation. The thought that others saw her as careless, as someone who walked away from her life, made her stomach twist. She tried again, softer this time. Thandi, I left because I trusted you. I thought I was helping you. How could you do this? But Thandi's face hardened even more. Stop acting like the victim. You're the one with a fancy job, traveling the world. You'll be fine. I'm the one who needs this place. You don't get it. You've had enough. Now it's my turn. Amelie stood there, her suitcase still by the door, her body trembling with shock. It was as if the cousin she grew up with, the one she once considered a sister, had vanished. In her place stood someone unrecognizable, someone willing to lie, deceive, and erase her without a trace. That night, Amelie sat awake, staring at the ceiling of the couch she was barely allowed to use. For the first time, she wondered if kindness had been her biggest mistake. Amelie thought maybe the family would help her make sense of what was happening. After all, they had seen how close she and Thandi were growing up. Surely, they would remind Thandi of her wrongs and help her return the apartment without drama. So she picked up the phone, one relative after another, pouring out the story with shaking hands and a heavy heart. But instead of comfort, she was met with silence and sighs. Her aunt, who used to praise her for being so responsible, snapped. Amelie, you've got a good job. You've traveled. You're doing better than most of us. Why can't you just let Thandi have the place? She needs it more than you. The words stung. Amelie sat on the edge of her bed. Well, the couch she was now forced to use, and felt her chest tighten. She had expected love, expected someone to say, "That's wrong, we'll sort this out." Instead, her family was telling her to give up what was rightfully hers simply because she had worked hard for a better life. One by one, the calls went the same way. Her uncle shook his head at her complaints, saying, "You young people with money don't understand struggle. Be grateful and let her stay." A cousin laughed. "So what if she lied? She needs it more. Don't be selfish." Each word piled on, heavier than the last. Amelie realized quickly that Thandi had been busy spinning her version of the story long before she returned. She must have told everyone that Amelie had left for good, that she was struggling, that the apartment was her only safe place. She painted herself as the victim, abandoned and deserving of sympathy. And because Amelie was the one with a steady job and opportunities, nobody questioned it. They believed Thandi without hesitation. The betrayal ran deeper than the walls of her apartment. It had spread through the very people she trusted most. Family gatherings, childhood memories, moments of shared laughter. Suddenly, all of it felt tainted. Amelie wasn't just fighting for her home. She was fighting against the image her cousin had created of her, a cruel version where she was the greedy one and Thandi the helpless soul. Sitting alone, phone buzzing with more messages telling her to just let it go, Amelie felt abandoned in a way she had never experienced before. The people who should have protected her had turned their backs, all because she had worked hard and refused to be used. In that moment, she understood the depth of Thandi's plan. This wasn't carelessness or confusion. Thandi had prepared for this, carefully playing the victim, making Amelie look like the villain before she even stepped through the door. And the family had swallowed every word. Amelie wiped her tears, her heart broken but her mind beginning to clear. If she couldn't count on her relatives, she would have to count on herself. Amelie knew she couldn't just sit back and accept what was happening. The more she thought about it, the clearer it became that Thandi's betrayal ran deeper than cold words or locked doors. Something about how confident she was, how boldly she declared, "This is my place now," didn't sit right. Thandi wasn't just acting entitled, she was acting like she had proof. And that thought chilled Amelie to her core. So she started digging. She pulled out her lease agreement, the receipts of her monthly payments, even emails from the landlord. Everything clearly showed her name, her bank details, her rights. But when she asked the landlord about the confusion, his answer shocked her. "Your cousin showed me papers saying she had taken over the rental," he said carefully. Amelie's stomach dropped. Papers? What papers? She had never signed anything like that. With shaking hands, she asked to see them. And there it was, her cousin's boldest move yet. Thandi had forged documents claiming she was now the rightful tenant. Her signature was fake, clumsy, but enough to make someone who didn't know better believe. Amelie felt anger rising in her chest. This wasn't just betrayal anymore, it was fraud. As if that wasn't enough, Amelie's suspicions pushed her to check further. She went through some of Thandi's things while she was out and stumbled across her phone left unlocked on the table. What she found there nearly broke her. Screenshots, messages, jokes. Thandie bragging to her friends about stealing the apartment like it was a game. One message read, "She's so stupid. She actually trusted me with everything. Now it's mine." Another had laughing emojis after she told a friend, "She'll cry when she comes back, but who cares? She left, so I win." Amelie's hands shook as she read, scrolling through more proof of just how cruel Thandie had been behind her back. This wasn't desperation. This wasn't survival. It was deliberate, calculated, and laced with arrogance. Thandie had mocked her kindness, turning what was supposed to be an act of love into a chance for conquest. The weight of it pressed down on Amelie, but at the same time, something inside her shifted. The sadness that had been drowning her slowly gave way to a fire she hadn't felt before. For weeks she had been questioning herself, wondering if she was being selfish, if maybe her family was right. But now she knew the truth. She wasn't the villain. Thandie was. She gathered every message, every document, every shred of proof she could find. Carefully, she saved copies, took photos, and stored them away. Each piece of evidence wasn't just a weapon for the fight ahead. It was also a reminder that she wasn't crazy, and she wasn't wrong. Amelie looked around the apartment that night and whispered to herself, "She thinks she's won. But she has no idea what's coming." Amelie had reached her limit. For weeks she had cried, begged, and tried to reason with Thandie. She had called relatives, explained herself to neighbors, and defended her name against the lies. But now she was done. She refused to bow down. This was her home, her hard work, her life. And she wasn't going to let anyone, not even family, take it away. She sat at her small table one evening with her papers spread out in front of her. The original lease with her name printed clearly. Bank statements showing every rent payment made faithfully, month after month. Emails with the landlord, messages with building management. Even neighbors who remembered the day she moved in. Piece by piece, she built a file thick with evidence, each page proof that the apartment was hers and hers alone. Still, Amelie knew this wasn't a battle she could fight alone. That's when she called Saifo, a lawyer friend she'd grown up with in Soweto. Saifo had always been sharp, the kind of person who saw through lies in seconds. When Amelie explained everything, he didn't laugh at her or tell her to let it go. Instead, he leaned forward and said firmly, "They've played you long enough. Now it's time to play smart." With his guidance, Amelie began legal proceedings. It wasn't easy. The paperwork was heavy, the process slow, and the idea of going to court against her own cousin broke her heart. But every time she looked at the evidence, every time she remembered Thandie bragging in those cruel messages, her resolve hardened. This wasn't about family anymore. It was about justice. When Thandie found out, she laughed. Not the nervous laugh of someone afraid of being caught, but the smug chuckle of someone who believed she was untouchable. "Go ahead," she sneered. "Take me to court. The family will never let you win. They're all on my side." And she wasn't lying. Relatives called Amelie again, scolding her. "How can you drag family to court? You're embarrassing us. You're successful, just let her stay." But this time Amelie didn't break. She listened quietly, then hung up. For once, she wasn't going to explain herself to people who had already chosen not to see the truth. Every night she worked with Saifo, organizing documents, preparing witnesses, and going over every possible detail. The landlord agreed to testify. A few neighbors, tired of Thandie's lies, promised to speak the truth. Amelie finally felt a sense of strength building inside her. Thandie still strutted around the apartment like she had already won, tossing her hair, smiling smugly whenever their eyes met. But Amelie no longer felt powerless. She knew something Thandie didn't, that lies can only carry someone so far. Eventually, the truth catches up. And for Thandie, that day was coming. The day of the court hearing felt unreal to Amelie. She woke up before sunrise, her stomach tight with nerves but her mind steady. This was it, the moment she had been working toward. Saifo walked beside her into the courthouse, carrying the thick folder of documents they had organized so carefully. Every page felt like a shield. She whispered to herself, "I have the truth on my side." When they entered the courtroom, Amelie spotted Thandie across the room. She was dressed sharply, chin held high, smirking as if she had already won. Several relatives sat behind her, whispering among themselves, throwing Amelie judgmental looks. The same people who had shamed her on the phone were now here in person, acting like Thandie's cheerleader. For a moment, Amelie's heart sank, but then she remembered why she was there. This wasn't about their approval. This was about her home. When it was Amelie's turn to present her case, Saifo guided her gently. She placed receipts before the judge, each one showing her consistent rental payments over the years. She showed her bank statements, all linked directly to her name. Then the landlord stepped forward, firm and clear, testifying that Amelie was the only rightful tenant and that Thandie's supposed takeover had never been approved. Piece by piece, Amelie's story stood strong, like bricks building a wall no one could knock down. Then came Thandie's turn. At first, she strutted forward confidently, pulling out the forged documents she had once waved around so proudly. But the moment the judge examined them, the cracks began to show. The signature didn't match. The dates overlapped strangely. Even the format looked suspicious. The judge raised his eyebrow, questioning her sharply. Thandi stumbled through her answers, her voice losing its edge. Sifo pressed further, calmly exposing the lies. Your Honor, if you compare the handwriting here to Ms. Amelie's actual signature, you'll see the forgery clearly. The courtroom leaned forward as the evidence was displayed side by side. Gasps rippled through the room. The truth was undeniable. By the time Thandi realized she was cornered, her confidence had melted away. She stammered, fidgeted, and avoided eye contact. The family members behind her shifted uncomfortably, their earlier whispers silenced. Finally, the judge spoke, his voice firm and heavy with authority. This apartment belongs to Amelie. The evidence is clear. Forgery is a serious matter, and let this be a warning, not only to you, Thandi, but to anyone who enables such deceit. Family or not, the law will not tolerate lies. The room fell silent. Thandi's face turned pale, her smirk gone. The relatives who had once defended her lowered their heads, unable to meet Amelie's eye. As the gavel struck, Amelie felt a wave of relief wash over her. For months she had been doubted, shamed, and betrayed, but here, in this moment, the truth had finally spoken louder than the lies, and no one could silence it again. Thandi had walked into court with her head high, but after the judge's ruling, everything changed. The arrogance she carried like armor began to crack. At first, she tried to brush it off, telling anyone who would listen that Amelie had cheated, or that the judge was unfair. But when the official eviction papers arrived at the apartment, stamped and signed, reality hit her hard. She had lost. Amelie watched silently as the papers were handed over. Thandi's hands trembled as she read them, her face drained of the confidence she once had. The same cousin who had laughed in her face, who had locked her out of her own bedroom, now looked small and shaken. She tried to argue, muttering excuses about how she had nowhere else to go, but the law left no room for her lies anymore. Word spread quickly through the family. At first, many of them had rallied around Thandi, believing her story and calling Amelie heartless. But once the truth came out in court, the forged documents, the mocking messages, the arrogance on display, those same relatives began to distance themselves. Calls that once came daily to shame Amelie now stopped altogether. Instead, the silence grew. No one wanted to be associated with Thandi's downfall. One by one, her supporters vanished. The aunt who told Amelie to let her have the place stopped answering Thandi's calls. The cousin who laughed at Amelie's pain unfriended Thandi quietly online. Even the neighbors, who once gave Amelie cold stares, now looked at Thandi with suspicion. She wasn't a victim anymore, she was exposed. The eviction day arrived, and it was nothing like the dramatic battles Thandi had once imagined she could win. There were no family members standing beside her, no cheering voices telling her she was right. She carried her bags down the stairs alone, eyes red from crying, her pride shattered. A few neighbors peeked through their doors, whispering, but no one offered help. The same arrogance that once filled her walk was gone, replaced with the slow, heavy steps of someone who knew she had destroyed her own chances. Amelie stood by quietly, watching with mixed emotions. She didn't celebrate or mock her cousin. There was no gloating. Instead, she felt a deep sadness at how far things had fallen. All she had wanted was to help, to offer kindness. And now here they were, two cousins torn apart by greed and lies. When the door finally closed behind Thandi for the last time, the apartment felt lighter, almost as if it could breathe again. The walls that once held secrets and betrayal now stood ready for healing. Thandi, meanwhile, walked away not just without a home, but without the trust and support she had once manipulated so easily. Family, friends, neighbors, everyone had seen the truth. And in the end, she was left with nothing but the weight of her own betrayal. When Thandi was finally gone, the apartment felt strange. For months it had been a place of conflict and tension, and now it was quiet again. Amelie stood in the middle of her living room, looking around at the bare walls and mismatched furniture Thandi had left behind. It didn't feel like home yet, but for the first time in a long time, she felt a sense of relief. This was her space again, and she was determined to bring it back to life. She started small. She dug out the boxes where she had kept her belongings safe, carefully unwrapping her framed photos. One by one, she rehung them on the walls. The picture of her parents, the snapshots with friends, and the silly childhood photo of her and Thandi before things had gone so wrong. Each nail hammered into the wall felt like reclaiming a piece of herself. The cushions she loved went back on the couch. Her favorite blanket was folded neatly in its corner, and her little plant was set back by the window where the sun could reach it. Slowly, the apartment began to look like the place she had once built with pride. But more than the decorations, it was the peace that returned to the air. She could sit on her couch without feeling like an intruder. She could sleep in her own bed again without fear. Amelie didn't boast about her win. She didn't run to relatives to say, "I told you so." She knew that the truth had already spoken for itself. Those who had doubted her had seen everything unfold in court. Those who had turned their backs were silent now, too embarrassed to admit they were wrong. Instead of seeking their apologies, Amelie turned her focus inward. She made a quiet decision. From now on, her kindness would have boundaries. She had learned the hardest way that being open-hearted didn't mean letting people walk over her. Helping family was one thing, but giving away everything she had worked for without protection was something she would never do again. Trust, she realized, was precious, and it needed to be guarded. When the apartment was finally restored, Amelie sat by the window with a cup of tea. The city lights of Johannesburg sparkled outside, and for the first time in months, she felt peace settle into her chest. She thought about how much she had lost, time, trust, even pieces of her family connection. But she also thought about how much she had gained. Strength, clarity, the courage to stand her ground. Her victory wasn't loud. It wasn't full of celebrations or revenge. It was in the quiet moments, a home restored, a heart healing, and a woman who now knew her worth. Amelie smiled softly to herself. This was not just about winning her apartment back. It was about reclaiming her peace, her voice, and her boundaries. Amelie could have kept her story private, but she knew too many people who had gone through the same kind of pain in silence. Friends had whispered to her about cousins who took their money, siblings who refused to return borrowed cars, or relatives who guilt-tripped them into giving away more than they could afford. She realized her experience wasn't unique. It was just one version of a bigger problem many people were too afraid to speak about. So she decided to share her story publicly. She spoke openly about what happened, from the moment she handed Thandi the keys to the day she walked back into her restored apartment. She didn't sugarcoat it. She spoke about the hurt, the betrayal, and the shame of being judged by her own family. But she also spoke about the power of standing firm, of protecting yourself even when people call you selfish, and of how the law had defended her when family had failed. Her words spread quickly. On social media, in community groups, and even at church gatherings, people repeated Amelie's story. Many said it gave them courage to set boundaries, to protect their homes, and to remember that trust should never replace paperwork. Across South Africa, her experience became a cautionary tale with a clear message. Kindness is important, but kindness without boundaries can destroy you. As for Thandi, her name became a quiet warning. People remembered her not for what she had gained, but for how she had lost everything through greed. Meanwhile, Amelie thrived, stronger, wiser, and finally at peace. She had turned her pain into a lesson that echoed far beyond her apartment walls. And in that, she found her true victory.